Hey, Tasshin.
Hi, Vince.
I mean, we just talked before I hit
We just
record, but
talked.
still, it's like formally, hi.
Hi, we're here.
Yeah, exactly. That's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, brother.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I appreciate you being willing to. I invited you to have this conversation on X, or my favorite platform to hate.
My favorite platform to love.
Great. I was there with you for a while, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's getting a little weird.
it is.
It's getting a little fashy,
Mm.
on X, but we'll probably talk about that. So I proposed that we talk about this was the theme I proposed to you, which is Palestine, Teapot, and true Bodhisattvahood.
Hmm.
And it's, I guess, in response to a lot of frustrated, angry, um, maybe righteous, and not necessarily in all bad sense, but yeah, in some uh, posts that I've been sharing on X since, I
Hmm.
don't know, it's been ongoing since the October 7th in my case.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so I guess I wanted to explore that with you because I consider you to be one of my friends in the uh, teapot
Uh-huh.
subculture, which we can get into and talk about what that actually is,
Uh-huh.
because it's pretty, it's kind of vaguish, but or decentralized at least. But it seems like you're well respected in this decentralized
Mm.
subculture, and I think I'm part of that as well, but I seem to be taking a very different role from you in how I
Hmm.
relate to it, which is a little bit more critical and
Hmm.
challenging. And I haven't found that's really endeared me to many people in the
Hmm.
community. But some people like yourself like have engaged with my critiques in what feels like a good faith way, and I've really appreciated that. So I thought,
Mm.
it'd be cool to like have an even more personal conversation where people could see potentially if we decide to release any of this, um,
Hmm. Mm.
and I don't know, just sort of the human side of this, which doesn't come across often in like 280 characters.
Yeah. Um, I appreciate all that context. I think that's really helpful, and I think it's good to have a conversation about this. I think that I've been really struck by your perspectives on this. And, in general, I really value your perspectives and your opinions about the path and about practice. And, we've had a number of disagreements over the years, but I've always walked away like really learning a lot. And yeah, I do try to engage in good faith. And I think especially one of the practices I have just for any kind of conflict in general is like if I feel like text-based mediums especially can only hold so much. I don't even like to discourse or disagree on Twitter. I use it for
Mm,
other things. And it's like, hey, if I've said this to you before, like if we have a disagreement, let's get on a call and actually talk about it. And because it's just you
yep.
can actually hear the other person's perspective and where they're coming from in a way that text just really doesn't afford. So I'm glad we're
Yeah.
talking about this. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
great.
And the downside of doing that without recording it and sharing it back is, of course, then it's just like a private thing that happens and
Right, right.
doesn't necessarily filter out in the same way to the collective.
Totally.
So this
Totally.
is this is cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you have any suggestions for where you'd like to start or what feels like a good starting place?
I, I would be curious to see your take on like what teapot is or how you describe that phenomena. I did spend a little bit of time reflecting on it, and I
Hmm.
came up with a little like micro definition, but I don't think it's
Ooh.
exhaustive. It's
Ooh,
just a starting
juicy.
point. But I'm curious even before sharing that if there's anything, thoughts on teapot and what it is. If you thought, have you meditated on that? How do you can.
Yeah. Um, I love that, and I'm so curious what your definition will be. I suspect it'll be spicier than mine, but I liked what you said earlier about it being a decentralized community because I felt a little bit of trepidation before this conversation for really all three of the things you want to talk about. I feel like so woefully inexpert in like um I really don't know as much as I ought to about the war, and I don't know as much I don't know, I'm in Teapot certainly, but I'm not there's no like elected four-figure leader or something. It's decentralized, as you said. And then also with the Bodhisattva path, I'm like still figuring it out, very as
Right,
we all are. So,
right.
um, but yeah, Teapot. I think for me, it's very much about specific people. like there are specific friends that I've cultivated very deep friendships with that I've met through Twitter and developed those relationships through Twitter. And they're, I think some of my closest friends at this point are people I've met through Twitter, and they're friendships that I treasure. And um, I think it is decentralized. I think it's spread throughout the world at this point. Like I can go to any major city and meet people who are connected to this network. And I like my friend Andrew Rose has been talking about it recently as the network, where it's like, yeah, it's not really about Twitter anymore, and it's not really it's a larger cloud of people that are connected. And I think it's not necessarily ideologically on the same page, like people having the same perspectives or even shared practices. There might be shared interests and common overlaps, but I think people have very, very different perspectives on the world. And it's more, if anything, I'd say it's like a developmental similarity, where for
Mm,
me, at least, it really helped me to, I mean, I sort of started to enter TPOT. I mean, I could go into detail, but like as I was individuating from being at the monastery for many years, and it's
mm,
like, I mean, from a developmentalist perspective, it kind of helped me jump from 3 to 4 in the Keegan stages, where it's like I was in kind of a tribal state of mind, identified with the Maple ideology and worldview and practices, which was great for me at the time. It really was. And then it stopped being great for me, and I had to find a new way. And
mm,
being with so many weirdos from around the world who saw things so differently really helped me to find my own way and find my
mhm,
own life. So I feel a sense of connection and intimacy with it, and like indebtedness to it, where it's like these are my people, that helped me to find myself in the world.
mm,
Yeah, that's what Teapot is to me, at least.
mm, mm. I like what you're saying about the developmental part. I guess I see the phenomena similarly. Like this is something that there's lot of people coming together, not like you said around a particular ideology or like framework, which is very common. You know, like a bunch of people come together around a specific book or teacher
Hmm.
or teaching or whatever. This is different because there are teachers and teachings that are you see commonly in that community, but it's pretty broad.
Yeah,
Um,
and you don't have to buy into any of them. I think there are major, if anything, there's
right,
like themes, like
right,
non-coercion is a big one, or
right.
um, and people bring their own interests, and you don't have to be interested in the same things other people are interested in.
Right, but there's something if you put all those themes together, you'd start to see like kind of broader theme of like
Absolutely.
yeah the connection there, yeah, which I think you're totally right. There's something maybe developmental underneath that. I was thinking about the book The Postmodern Condition,
Mm,
which David Chapman originally recommended to me,
mm,
who's one of the, you know, he's a teapot
hmm.
philosopher. And maybe he wouldn't, he probably reject that phrase term, but he is a philosopher and well respected in that space.
Sure.
uh and I remember the author Jean Francois Lyotard. He said, simplifying to the extreme, I define postmodern
Mm,
as incredulity toward meta narratives.
mm,
And you know, I find there's something very postmodern about this community where
mm,
there's a kind of general skepticism toward meta narratives of
mm,
thinking that like one way of describing reality could be totally comprehensive and true for everyone everywhere all the time.
mhm,
And I see that as one of the things I really appreciate about Teapot.
mm,
You know, in terms of it representing a move out of like the modern condition, which was much more like about trying to find the right ideology and all these clashing isms, you know, communism versus capitalism versus like all these kind of clashing religions, as who's got the best, which framework is going to come out on top, you know, and everyone's
mm.
going to eventually believe. um it's like
Uh-huh.
some I see that as the more of the modern condition. And so in that sense it feels like a real relief, you know, to see communities, you know, that are forming um around this. And it, I guess that's the reason for me, I always connect my experience of coming up in the integral community, Ken Wilber's community, with Teapot, because it felt like a very similar kind of vibe there,
Hmm. Hmm.
where so many people I met were just doing radically different kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And there'd be someone who's super into like spiritual surrender of the lineage of Adi Da, who is also like a concert pianist. I'm literally describing an actual person I
Uh-huh.
worked with. And then someone else would be like super into like video production and have no interest in spiritual practice or meditation, but they have a lot of interest in like psychological work.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I guess that's something I've seen is consistent with the teapot world, is this sort of like postmodern incredulity towards meta narratives.
Mm-hmm. How would that fit with it being? I've never really understood this, but would you describe Teapot as metamodern or not metamodern?
I, I guess for me, I would say the center of gravity of teapot seems to be in the transition between modern to postmodern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like kind of, I would call that post-rational,
Mm-hmm.
because the main mode of modernity is rational individualism. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
this is Ken Wilber's and Gene Gebser's kind of take, but I find that to be true. Um, so people like are questioning the limits of rationality and model making are
Mm,
post-rational.
I see. Uh-huh.
And I think as a result they're postmodern. But there's a transition. It's like there's a awkward developmental phase where you're letting go of the absoluteness of models, and you can kind of, Ken Wilber called it the performance contradiction. He said you can absolutize that too,
Mm,
where you can sort of say like everything is relative.
mm-hmm.
That statement isn't a relative statement; it's an absolute statement.
Mm-hmm.
All perspectives are valid. Okay,
Mm,
that perspective you're saying is more valid than any other perspective, which says that certain perspectives are more valid than others.
mm,
And so like the whole idea of postmodernity rests on a performance contradiction.
mm,
That's, or at least the early stages of it, where you're deconstructing that deconstructive postmodernism.
mm,
Robert Keegan would call it. He also has a reconstructive postmodern phase. I don't think Teapot is in the reconstructive postmodern phase, but I think some people in it are. It's like
mm,
there's a spectrum, within, there's a center of gravity, but there's a spectrum.
mm-hmm.
Uh, as well, or more it's like a scatter graph, where
Uh-huh.
like most of the dots are in the center around this sort of modern to postmodern transition, but then there's like, you see like kind of trailing off in both directions.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see some people that are more traditional, that are they're just treating it like a group. I'm sure you saw that
Right.
probably at Vibe Camp, probably some
Uh,
people there that are just like, just drinking the Kool-Aid and don't really aren't really maybe vibing in the same way as everyone
uh-huh.
else.
Uh-huh.
uh and then you find some weird people too that are like aliens even within the space,
Right.
who kind of seem to be like a David Chapman I mentioned. He seems like an alien to me.
Mm,
um
mm-hmm.
an
Mm-hmm.
example, I think he's a meta modern
Mm-hmm.
thinker.
Mm, mm,
I don't know, so I see a mix, but I mostly see people kind of in the, yeah, like early postmodern
mm.
stage, I guess.
I recently saw a really nice tweet from Mechanical Monk which I can link you to later, but he drew this diagram or made like a video of what Teapot is, and he was kind of arguing that like Teapot is a moving target where like I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking of these people and then you're thinking of these people and like there's some overlap. Like you and I are both friends with like Daniel Thorson, for example, or some other people that we'd have in common, or I know who David Chapman is, or whatever. And so there's enough
Right,
overlap that we could be like, oh, we're both pointing at Teapot, but then you don't know some people that I'm pointing to, and I don't know
right.
some people you're pointing to, and then eventually this is happening more and more. People use the acronym Teapot, and you're like, I've never seen you. I don't know who you're talking about, and I don't know what you're describing. I think you and I have enough of a shared sense of the thing, but I
Yeah,
thought that was
yeah,
a really good point that it's not um, like a homogenous group.
right.
Like it has no one likes, this is a very probably like post-rat thing to do. Nobody likes labeling it. So it's like, well, everyone's unhappy with the term teapot. Nobody wants to identify as teapot or as a post-rat or
I mean, even
whatever,
the
but
term, I mean, in the phrase, the acronym Teapot itself
right.
is kind of,
Relative and
it's like
relational.
this part of Twitter. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
what you're saying,
exactly.
it's like a network. I see that.
Hmm.
There was a site for a while, I don't know if you saw it, where you could see the sort of, it was like a ranking or listing of like the
Mm,
most sort of central
I do
people
remember
inside of a
that.
network. It was like you could pull up Teapot and sort of see a
Yeah.
list. I was like, I'm on that list,
Uh-huh. And you're
which
like,
I would take myself, I would opt out of that list if I could choose to,
right.
but it's not a choice, as you're part of this network.
Yeah, if you know the acronym, arguably you are in it. It's just like once you know, and
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, so what I hear you saying from like the network perspective is like you see it from your point of view of the network, and
Hmm.
the network is evolving. It's not static. It
Hmm.
continues to grow and change and shift.
That's
So
right.
your view of it is changing and shifting with the network. So
That's right.
you have both a limited view and it of something that's changing.
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, that seems true to me, which doesn't mean we can't talk about it
Hmm.
or like try to, come up with something useful to say about it. I mean, I would describe it this way. I'll tell you how I would
Yeah,
describe
yeah,
it.
let's hear it. Oh
I'm
boy.
not so sure about the last part. No, it's not that bad. So I describe TPOT as a weird, and here I'm using the weird acronym: Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic post-rational subculture that's connected by a shared interest in self-agency and awareness.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. That seems good. Something that's popping out to me is just also how much of this is specifically enabled by the internet and Twitter in particular. Or I think there's something starting to happen that you could call like a Twitter like Blue Sky is a Twitter like, or Mastodon is a Twitter like. I hope we have other Twitter likes in the future because, as you said, X is becoming kind of fashy. Or like, to me, the thing that a Twitter like is very much like a public library, and then Twitter happens to be a company, and it's like, well, that has kind of skewed incentives and stuff like that. But in any case, I'm like, yeah, that all everything you said tracks, and then it's like I think it is meaningfully enabled by technology
right.
and whatever a Twitter
Yeah.
like is in particular.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. So that's missing in my description here. I agree. It's enabled by that, and there's something too, like the technology itself is very postmodern.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
These platforms and microblogging platforms, like you're getting these really tiny little snippets that are largely decontextualized,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just seeing a bunch of decontextualized atomized information flowing constantly through your stream without you have to put the context together.
That's right.
The platform itself does not do that. In fact, if you don't have the capability to do that, it might actually be really problematic
That's
because
true.
yeah, you don't know. So I'd say that it's almost perfectly complements the subculture,
Hmm.
the design of it.
Uh-huh.
Uh
That's true. And it makes sense of like why you would feel a resonance with, I mean, I wasn't in this myself, but from what I imagine, the integral community, and then also why that would be different of like I imagine Twitter wasn't a huge part of that back then because I don't even know what
no,
the years were, but
it
it wasn't
wasn't there.
even
No, Twitter launched the year after I left the Integral Institute.
right,
And
right.
so yeah, it wasn't part
So
of that. Blogging and podcast, or like very early, like
very
Web
early.
2 was part of it for sure. But
Yeah.
it was primarily an in-person community.
Hmm.
It was centered, it was like centered in person, and then had a sort of one to many kind of broadcast media, kind of Web
Hmm.
2.0 media thing to it. So it did look a lot different than that when
It
I
kind of
was there.
occurs to me that at least in my experience, the technology feels really central to the thing, and the properties you named are almost like emergent or like the kinds of people that would resonate with it or something, or be able to make full use of it or
Right.
what have you. But like, it doesn't seem intrinsically necessary, but it does seem to me almost like that if you have a Twitter like something like this subculture would arise, and I could see different similar subcultures that had different properties or even an ideology or like different developmental stages or something. But I think that
Right.
a Twitter like is really good at clustering people who can vibe together or relate to each other and in a way that's more emergent. I think a lot about individualism and collectivism, and I
Mm.
think that this kind of technology affords the possibility of yeah, basically a Hegelian synthesis of individualism and collectivism, where each person can be their own individual, but also be in community with a larger network that respects their individuality, but can kind of coordinate as a whole. And I think Twitter likes kind of uniquely make that possible. And I could see ones that were like clusters that were meaningfully different. You'll see sometimes people talk about this. They're like, maybe there's a whole other cluster that's not connected to us at all that we have no idea about. Like almost like I forget what the alien version of that is, but like the likelihood that there's an alien civilization in any given solar system. It's like, well, maybe they're out there. Who knows?
Right. Something like the Drake equation would
The
describe
Dirichlet
how
equation. That's it.
likely
Yeah,
that would be.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Mm. You're using the term Twitter. I don't know if we've talked about this, but I will explicitly not use that term anymore to refer to X,
Uh-huh.
mainly because I think people are confusing the term Twitter with the term microblogging,
Huh.
since it was the original microblogging platform. I think a lot of times we conflate Twitter with microblogging. And so when you say Twitter like, I that's another way to me of saying microblogging. Um,
What's
um,
important to you there?
it's important to me to stop being so sentimental about Twitter
I
because
see.
Twitter's dead, and whatever that it was is gone. But microblogging is alive and well, and it's probably doing better now than when Twitter was alive.
Huh.
So I think it's somehow by being sentimentalizing Twitter, we mask our ability to perceive what's happening in broader terms with microblogging. Um, and we potentially overlook a lot of nasty shit happening on x.com as well by doing that.
I see. Yeah, I tend to use the word Twitter for different maybe sentimental reasons, as you're saying, but it's an intentional use on my term on my part, and uh, maybe I'll just use the word Twitter, and you can use the word X, and we can
Yeah, that's fine.
proceed
It's
accordingly.
it's no, it's fine. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah,
Like
very good.
that's a difference in frames.
Yes.
Um, yeah. Okay. Well, this has been very conceptual so far, but I'm curious to bring it a little downward too, because
Hmm.
you know, I remember maybe it was like a week after October 7th, Hamas attacked um, civilians in Israel, and I knew from my own experience, having grown up as a Palestinian in a Palestinian and American household, and having watched this to some degree play out over 40 plus years, 40 years at the time, that I was like, the blowback from this is going to be 10x at
Hmm.
least, because
Hmm.
that's consistent
Hmm.
throughout time. It's always Israel will respond with 10 times the amount of violent force at least. And so I was like, if you take the numbers, it's like that's catastrophic. Like that's
Hmm.
going to be terrible. And so I kind of knew within the first week, and I shared this on X, that this is going to be a genocide.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so for me, this is the perspective I'm coming from, is like I've known that a genocide has been going on from the beginning, or
Hmm.
I've known
Hmm.
that the intention or that the likely response was going to be genocidal.
Hmm.
And I think there's a lot of debate about whether or not this is. I think that debate is now totally foolish from my point of view.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, you frame this, for instance, as a war. I would call it a genocide. I would say the
Hmm.
genocide rather than the war or
Hmm.
the occupation, which is more accurate description. Because a war assumes that there's two countries, two sides that are kind of equivalent and they're at
Hmm.
war.
Hmm.
But this is rather like a group of people who've been dispossessed and occupied for decades, who wrongly lashed out and hurt civilians, but who did so from the point of view of being in a one up, one down power position.
Hmm.
So, like the group of people, are the Palestinian people, had been occupied, their movements are controlled, things coming in and out of Gaza were controlled in terms of water, food, etc. Many people described it as an open air prison,
Hmm.
including a colleague of mine who lives in Tel Aviv. He described it that way to me one time. And so, from my point of view, it's like a lot of times people don't understand when they enter into the history of this, that just the basic history of occupation.
Hmm.
And so to frame it as a conflict between two equals in a way obscures the power dynamics at play, where one group has so much more power over the other and has so much more are literally like nuclear power that's backed by the most powerful military in the world, who has a lock on the UN
Hmm.
in terms of our ability to veto the Americans. So it's kind of like David and Goliath rather than two superpowers going to war.
Hmm.
So that's one thing I'll just share, is just like kind of the frame for me of Palestine. And so I've been seeing it as that from the very beginning. And what I've found with on platforms like X and with the community of Teapot is just this sort of maddening silence,
Hmm.
or this sort of in my experience, is like a schizophrenic feed where on the one hand I'm seeing Palestinian activists and intellectuals and people who are, I think, doing good work at kind of bringing awareness to an ongoing live stream genocide, and then another group of folks more in the teapot space who are kind of sharing their psychonautic explorations and talking about their cool practices and giving, challenging takes, and
Hmm.
all of which has this other very different vibe, which is much more self-focused. And the two of them in contrast, really, that's for me, that's the tension I'm existing in. And I can totally relate to the self-absorbed interest in my own transformation and wanting to play around, and I totally get that because that's where I've been, like that's my background as well. But it's kind of maddening to see these two side by side, and I feel like there's so much missed opportunity with Teapot, given that it's so influential right now in culture, in our mainstream culture. Um, and so I guess I'm saddened by the fact that I don't see that community having really come around to care much about what's happening in these kind of global situations. Like you talked about individualism and collectivism. I feel like it's way more skewed toward individualism in the teapot world than it is collectivism.
Hmm.
Um, so that's actually a criticism I'd have. I don't feel like they're both anding it at all. But anyway, yeah, that's just a little bit where I'm coming from, I guess.
Um, I hear you. Well, just first off, really mourning and grieving the plight of the Palestinian people that's happening, and feeling personally connected to that because of your family and watching the news very closely, and really actively grieving that of just the evil that's happening, and caring about that and wanting to see that change and end, and seeing that as a genocide, not as a war,
Mm-hmm.
and really appreciating people who are speaking up and being vocal about it and trying to work for change to resolve that crisis. And uh, it feeling, you use the word like schizophrenic to sort of see Teapot, which seems sort of like self-absorbed and individualistic, where it's like people are talking about whatever they're on about, and it's like I got this metaphor hearing you talk about it of like someone who's starving, who's like incredibly hungry, and then they're like next to some rich people who are like having like coffee and talking about, some abstruse philosophy, and you're like, I'm starving. Like, can you please give me some of your food? Like, I'm having a real problem here, and you're talking about this stuff
Mm-hmm.
that really doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And uh, yeah, that being really painful, and then also a care about, you're like, yeah, Teapot's incredibly powerful and culturally powerful, and why aren't you talking about this? You should be talking about this so that we can use your power for good and change the world in that way.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a naive of me to expect that in some way. So
Hmm.
this is where I get like a little, this is where I feel the bind. It's like on the one hand, I sort of intellectually get like if this really is developmental,
Hmm.
as we're describing, if this cultural phenomena has a developmental dimension to it, then why would I expect the bulk majority of people who are, coming out of individual rationalism to
Hmm.
be focused on anything other than that, like, you know, um, kind of
Who
things that are
would be
related
well
to that.
positioned to make a change that had positive effect in the world from a developmental perspective?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess anyone could.
Hmm.
So maybe the issue isn't the underlying development, but it's the cultural
Hmm.
expression of that. In
Hmm.
this case, it's, weird is, I think, a good way of putting it. White, well, sorry, Western, but those two are connected. Educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, it feels like a lot of what you're saying is true because we're in this weird culture in the US largely, especially the educated teapot,
Hmm.
the whole US is not weird. Um, there's a lot of uneducated people and people without access to resources, um, but like we're having this weird conversation. Uh, and meanwhile, in the global commons, we're like you said, right next to uh, people that are posting videos constantly of people being, like shot and killed and
Hmm.
assassinated, executed, like right there, and
Hmm.
children starving, etc.
Hmm.
And it's like, I mean, this is the critique that postmodernism has had for a long time of modernity. It's like the colonialist thing. It's like how is it that we have so much privilege to be able to have these conversations in the first place? But because we ourselves are living on dispossessed land, like we
Hmm.
ourselves dispossessed the Native Americans to be able to be here. We ourselves brought African slaves from Africa to be able to take care of our cotton mills and run our agricultural industry. And so we ourselves built a country on those very foundations. And we ourselves, as Western people, escaped persecution in Europe.
Hmm.
Um, our whole history of escaping persecution and then bringing it with us is so like what's happening with Israel and Palestine, from my point of view. It's the same basic
Hmm.
pattern. And I think it's hard to see that when you're focused on
Hmm.
on your individual journey of transformation, and without like being able to zoom out into these broader collective patterns that are shaping you as much as you are shaping yourself.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
um and I wonder if sometimes like we overestimate our agency, or we over index on our agency
Hmm.
in this community. And that'd be my, I guess, my question or challenge to folks.
Can you say more about that, the over-indexing on agency? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like for me, the synthesis of the agency and communion is what I'm most interested in right now,
Hmm.
because that schizophrenic split feels like it's a split of these two, where it's like you have people that have high agency and have lots of opportunity and privilege, and then you have people that have extremely low ability to effectively um, exercise their agency.
Hmm.
I mean, they barely can get food.
Hmm.
So it's like such a huge contrast there. And like, what's the difference between these two groups of people? Well, like historically, it's like the only reason I'm on this side of the street is because my grandfather was able to get into this country in 1950.
Hmm.
And he was lucky essentially.
Hmm.
So like the only difference is basically luck of birth. Like where you're born.
Hmm.
And I think we take so much credit for the stuff that has nothing to do whatsoever with us. It's like when Obama, said you didn't build that, and everyone fucking flipped out. I don't know if you
Hmm.
remember that. But he was
I
talking
don't
about
know.
he was talking about infrastructure, and there was a huge backlash from the right, like we built that, into American individualism. And
Huh.
it's like I think what the genocide in Gaza has taught me is I'm just lucky. I'm just
Hmm.
lucky because I have cousins who are in the West Bank right now, and they're living in concentration camp type environments. Like they're scared to leave their home because people around them are getting shot by settlers. And 5 Palestinian Americans have died in the West Bank this past year. People who
Hmm.
are just going over there to visit family. Um, so it's extremely bad right now, even in the West Bank, which is considered to be the more stable of the two Palestinian regions.
Hmm.
Uh, in Gaza, I have 2 family members here in North Carolina in Asheville that are married into my family, right? So they're not direct family members of their spouses, and they both have lost over 200 family members in
Hmm.
Gaza,
Hmm.
which is hard for people even in the West to understand because we don't come from big families like that where
Hmm.
you could even
Hmm.
imagine having 200 family members. But
Hmm.
yeah, like whole family trees are essentially being wiped out,
Yes.
um, are cut down. So it's to me, it's very because I'm in both worlds, I'm teaching meditation and I'm hearing about, what's going on for my cousin in the West Bank, and I'm hearing about what's happening for other Palestinians that I know. I'm like, it's a very hard tension to hold. So for me, the synthesis of agency and communion is like, I can recognize like I have a certain amount of agency in part because of the communal situation. Like we have a community that optimizes for agency,
Mm-hmm.
and it optimizes for agency at the negative, at the expense of many other communities agency, and has historically and even presently.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the opportunities we have are because of they've been taken, rather than it's like not an omni-win situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's a lack of kind of acknowledgement of that often, in part because you start to feel really bad, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And if there's anything I've noticed about Teapot is like people don't want to feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like people want to empower each other and raise each other up, and I think there's something beautiful about that. But to me, it comes at the expense of valid criticism, of being open to hearing valid criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I felt. I've been largely my criticisms have been responded to. It's like, oh yeah, this is, you're just like, it's like I'm a downer. I'm like, yeah, sorry, it is a downer. It really is.
Hmm.
How do you, I know that's kind of general and broad, but how do you respond to something like that?
Can you ask there's a lot of thoughts running through my mind. Can you ask a specific question?
I'm just curious what your general, yeah, sense of that
Well,
is.
first off, my heart hurts. I mean, it hurts
Mm,
to know that um, violence is happening at scale, and it hurts to hear that. And I'm okay hurting. I know, I mean, I've done a lot of, I can feel that, but it hurts, and I feel sad and I feel grief knowing about this travesty that's happening. And I feel that about a lot of things that I know about in the world now, including this.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And that's always, yeah, hard to be with. And I try to learn how to be with that. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be reminded of what's happening and to be connected to it.
mm,
Um, I feel a desire to have change occur. That feels like it matters. I would like war, genocide, evil, violence to end. I'm a pacifist. One of the worst days of my life every year is when I pay taxes. I hate paying my taxes, partly because it's annoying bureaucratically, but even more so because I feel like I'm compromising my own ethics by supporting the U.S. military. And
mm,
every year I decide I'm going to pay my taxes so that I can continue to be part of this society in a legal and upright way.
right.
I'm not morally opposed to taxes as such, but I am morally opposed to what my government does with those taxes, including, I don't know the full extent of this. I'm sure you know much more, but certainly being complicit in this war, genocide, violence, murder, bombing, evil,
Yeah.
and other evils, known and unknown. I know that, like, I've been around a little bit.
Mm,
Um, so that hurts. That's the first and foremost thing. Um, and I feel for you. I mean, having family, it's just like, I mean, I went through just a couple years ago, my mom dying of cancer, and we knew about it 4 years before she died, 3, 4 years before she died. And
mm,
she lived a blessed life, and I felt perfectly ready to let her go, and it was still really hard. And it's like,
mm,
imagine my family members being murdered at scale and being starving and being oppressed and in all kinds of ways that I can only imagine. It's like that my heart would just be breaking on a daily basis. And I feel for you, my friend, going through that, and uh, for the Palestinian people more broadly, such that I'm connected to them, and for all who are subject to war. It's just like, it's just evil. It's just that, like, if you want to call it genocide, I'll just call it evil. Like, it's I think violence is evil, and war is evil, and genocide is evil, and bombs are evil, and guns are evil, and murder is evil, and killing children is evil. And it's just, my heart
mm,
breaks at that.
Mm.
As far as the other specific things you were saying, I'm reminded of an argument that I've had or witnessed many times where there's kind of two recurring schools of thought in our culture where how do I summarize this? Because I've seen this in a lot of specific instances, and I don't want to get into the specific instances, but like, yeah, let's take a simple example. Like, say your relative was a Trump supporter, and you personally didn't vote for Trump and don't want Trump to be president. There are people in our culture at this time who would say the thing to do is to be disconnected from that Trump supporter and
Right.
to never talk to them and to shame them for who they are and or give them radio silence and cut ties. And that's a whole school of thought that applies to many issues. And then there's a school of thought that says, well, how are you going to change their mind if you don't stay connected to them, if you don't really understand where they're coming from and listen to them and talk to them and share your own perspective? And I tend to be more in the latter school of thought of like connection is the basis of change.
Hmm.
um, Actually hearing other people's perspectives, sharing my own to the extent that it's possible and you're not beating each other up or, whatever, shooting at each other. But I think being connected to people is the basis of change. And I, I'm getting here somewhere here with this, which is to
Mm.
me, I hear you saying, I'm not part of Teapot. These are the people that are in Teapot. They're silent. They have these, I don't know, I hear you talking about like collective blind spots, which I think are very valid. I'm glad you're mentioning them. But it's like those people have the blind spot. And this is their problem. And to me, I could be wrong, but like,
Well, it's
I
really the
think,
Palestinians' problem. They're the ones that are suffering for the collective blind spot.
right, right.
I mean, they're suffering a lot more.
Yes. I think that you could usefully see yourself as part of Teapot, and that by staying connected to people in Teapot and speaking to them, you can change their minds. I think you've changed my mind about things about this and had an impact on me and had a causal influence on me. And I see you having that impact on other people. And I think that if you took that perspective, there's um, more or less efficacious ways of doing that. Uh, Ways that's a question that's come up for me about this is actually about like theories of change. And just one more thing is like I was recently in Santa Fe. My dad moved to Santa Fe, and when I was there, there's a lot. My dad is like very near the Santa Fe is the capital, and he's very near the capital where the government is, and so there's just always protests there, like at least once a week. And I personally, me, Tasshin, get so angry at these protesters because I, in my current worldview, think that their theory of change is just shit. They're like, by going to this place and having a sign, I'm going to change the world. To me, I see that that is like by and large, incredibly inefficacious and not going to produce the change that they want. And do I know what a theory of change is that would produce it? No, but I am spending all of my time and energy on things that I think will have a positive change in the world, even if they're not enough, even if they're not direct enough, even if they're not going to end or resolve all the issues I care about, which are many. I am putting all of my time and energy into things that I believe are efficacious. And presumably they think it's efficacious too. They think this is worth doing because they're doing it. And so in a way I'm kind of wrong about it because demonstrably people think that holding a sign in front of a capitol is going to change the world.
Mhm.
But
It does boost their agency when
mhm,
people protest.
that's
It's an
true.
exercise in agency.
And I do think there's a critical threshold where like if enough people protest something, it can have a change. Obviously that's happened.
Arab Spring.
Exactly. So it's not it's definitely not useless, but I guess
Mhm.
my point to you as an individual that I care about as my friend is I think you're actually incredibly well positioned to have a cultural impact on this group that you already are connected to, and that there are more or less efficacious ways of doing that. Like this conversation is efficacious, right? We're having a real conversation between two people who respect each other. We're recording that so that other people can listen. Like I think that's actually likely to produce the change that you're desiring to some extent. Is it
It's
gonna,
it's hard to
you know,
say. It's hard to say. I hear what you're saying.
yeah.
I think you and I have talked about this in the past too. I have some of the biggest changes I've been through have come through people challenging me even violently.
Uh-huh.
So, and my whole upbringing, as you can hear, it's rooted in violence.
Yes.
So it's like the story of my family uh, is one
Hmm.
of resilience in the face of violence.
Uh-huh. This is the
So
recurring thing we always argue about, or one of
yeah,
the several things.
yeah, it's like a place where we rub, I think,
Yeah.
but it's understandable. So like I'm a little more okay ruffling feathers and even having active conflict with people, um because I know that sometimes that's actually good.
Hmm.
Sometimes if you're too nice, people won't hear you.
Hmm.
If you have something powerfully challenging to say, it will just be like, oh yeah, that's nice, and I can just incorporate that into my worldview and feel good about knowing about it, but actually not really be doing anything significantly differently. So it's kind of like I don't know, this is in
Well,
the abstract, but
there's two things there. What there's one is which is like, how nice are you? And I actually do honestly believe that you would be more efficacious at seeing the changes you want to see, at least in the local community, if you were nicer. In addition to being kind, I do think you're kind. That's not an issue. But separately from that, like one of the things we talked about recently on the timeline was you're like, I've just been considering blocking people left and right. And I
oh, I
think
have
that
been
if
blocking them.
exactly,
I've lost half of my friend network in the last year, Tasshin. So
hmm,
that's where I am. So here, let me push back a little bit.
yeah,
I love what you're saying, but I don't think it's my job to do that. I think it's your job to do that.
to,
To be the one that can be nice and change people's minds on this topic.
oh, that's true. It is my job. You're right. I agree
Yeah,
with you.
because I'm too close to it.
Hmm.
It's too painful for me.
Hmm.
Like people start saying stuff to me, and it's like I'm hearing them deny the entire like truth of my whole identity, my family identity. It's like, no, like this is true. I'm
Hmm.
gonna have argue with you. Like you are dehumanizing me and everyone that's Palestinian right now, even by having like an argument, having even framing this as a debate, like, is there a
Hmm.
war going on, who's responsible, etc. So it's like what I find is like I want to keep talking because I want, it's like the Buddha, I'm comparing myself to the Buddha here. I know it's going to fly really well, but there's an analogy here where he's like, I'm awake. Okay, who can I, teach this to? Well, very few are going to understand it,
Hmm.
because it's subtle and hard to grasp. But my companions, the ones I was practicing with, like they seem like they'll get it. They have very little dust in their eyes. So like
Hmm.
I guess I see my role as really more like the people that have very little dust in their eyes. Uh, you know, maybe I can reach them.
What's the difference
And
in this case between someone who has dust in their eyes and someone who doesn't, from your perspective?
are they, yeah, like are they awake to their complicity in
Hmm.
in an active live stream genocide? Like are they
I mean, I pay
aware?
my taxes, and
Right.
that's
That's
certainly
part of it.
complicit.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
It's like paying taxes, but like you said, you can't really stop paying your taxes. My uncle did that and he
Well,
went to
I
prison.
actively choose to pay my taxes. I think I could stop paying
You
my
could choose.
taxes,
I'm gonna
and
say
every year I
you can do
consider,
that.
I seriously
You will
consider
go
it
to
every
prison though.
year.
You will go to prison.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe I can have more impact, positive impact on the world by paying my
Right.
taevery than
Right.
not. And
It's a trade-off.
literally every year I make this decision again.
Yeah. So I mean, to your point,
Yeah.
it's not like a black and white
Hmm.
thing where it's like I'm complicit in this very obvious way that I'm just choosing not to. The complicity is deep and it's
Subtle and
multidimensional.
systemic and
And even,
multi-generational, and
and yeah, and for me, it's
yeah.
like I was hanging out with a couple of my cousins recently who are from Palestine. They immigrated here in the early 90s when Palestinians were kicked out of Kuwait.
Hmm.
And so they were here, they had to rebuild their life. They lost everything. And I grew up with them. And they're doing advocacy work now in the US. And um, when I hear them, talk about their experience, it's like they're being, they're dealing with shit that I'm not having to deal with. Like one of my cousins recently lost her job. She was a high level exec at a tech company in San Francisco, and she thinks it's likely that she lost it because of her advocacy work within the company.
Mm. Mm.
Um, so I guess when I see I've lost the thread a bit here in terms of connecting back to what we were talking about. Um, but where was I going with that other
You were saying
thing?
something as my job as being
Yeah.
part of
Okay.
TPOT
So
versus your job.
right. So like when I talk to say like I'll talk to my great uncle, my grandfather's brother who grew up in Palestine, and I'll hear the kinds of things that he'll share. Um, and like I I don't have those kind of views.
Mm,
Like he's extreme compared to me in terms of like how he's viewing things. This is my interpretation. Like there's a definitely anti-Semitic uh, tendencies
mhm,
in the family system that I've seen
mhm,
explicit, and and I understand why. You know,
mhm,
like I have a lot of compassion. I don't actually let it stand. I challenge it when it
mhm,
arises, even
mhm,
now.
mhm,
I mean, this uncle I'm talking about. It's his family and his daughter that's in the West Bank right now.
mhm,
He's considering going to visit her in a couple months. He might get shot and killed while he's there.
mm,
It's quite possible. Um, so you know, for me, it's like I see like I can listen to him and I can hear him talk about stuff and I can sort through the pain and the anti-Semitism to hear, you know, some of the, what's genuine and sincere, and I can be there for him. Um, and then I feel like I can reach out and connect with some people and
mhm,
share my pain and what I'm going through, and you know, offer challenges or whatever to some folks. um, Recently, right after October 7th, someone from um, who lives in Israel, he's American. We have the same background lineage of the Vipassana tradition. He invited me on to have a dialogue about this, about what was happening,
mm,
and and then after we split, you know, and we're not able to have any conversations anymore
mm,
because of some of the things I saw him writing on X and
mhm,
so the perspectives that he seemed to be taking. And we got to a point where we pulled in a mutual like mentor, someone who's like a master mediator,
mhm,
and their basic feedback was like sometimes you can't have a conversation.
mm,
Sometimes it's just not possible.
mm,
And I feel like that's where I'm getting largely. It's like it's just not possible for me to have a conversation with a lot of people right now,
mhm, mhm,
because of
mhm, mhm,
how sensitive this is. And so
mhm,
when you say to her, and I hear like if you were kind or if you were nicer, you'd be more efficacious. I'm like, yeah, if I were able to be, I would,
mhm, mhm.
but I'm not.
Well, and the second part of what I was saying there is that when you block people, you are closing yourself off from the possibility of changing them. And from what I've just heard
And
from
I'm
you,
okay
it's
with
like,
that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That makes a bit more sense to me now from what you've said. But um,
Like I'm not going to change a Zionist's mind. I don't think, you know, someone who's like a, you know, Christian or Jewish Zionist. I don't think I'm going to
mm,
like change their mind by sharing something on like a micro blog.
mm.
uh,
Well, I mean, one of the really urgent questions for me here is like, what is a theory of change that produces genuine end to war, violence, genocide? Like, what actually resolves that, actually? Uh, because well, let me figure out how to put this. I am currently putting my time and energy into the things that I think I can do that will have the highest benefit from my current understanding and vantage point. Like, I literally spend every day of my life waking to sleeping, doing the thing that I think is best based on my, admittedly flawed, limited perspective, my own weaknesses and blind spots, but like I do that every day. And if I thought that I could lead to the end of war, genocide, violence, evil in a scaled way, I would work much harder to bring that about. I'd have to think about how it fits into all the things I'm doing and balance. But like, I really want to know how someone, like, I would hope, for example, that the service guild at some point will have a peace department. Currently, as you know, we have a love department, a curiosity department, an empowerment department. I would love for us to have a peace department. I want other departments, us to be able to have infrastructure for other focused crews at some point. It's like, well, the peace department should be bringing about peace, and I don't know how to do that. I mean, even Peace Pilgrim, my hero, she spent 30 years working in the way that she knew how for peace. And I don't think she wasted her time, far from it. But
mhm.
there is still not peace on Earth after her doing that.
Sure, sure, sure. Some of this reminds me, it has echoes of like the effective altruism movement.
Yeah.
Um,
I think I feel, how to put this. I have different aesthetic and ideological views with them on specific points, but I feel very sympathetic to their larger efforts and like, yeah, what do we actually do to actually have a real impact? I feel very I feel a kinship with that, even if there's specific things I disagree with or don't vibe with. So yeah, that's noted.
yeah, I mean, I think if we were to zoom in, like not to sort of take the too global perspective of like how do we stop all genocide, war, etc. And like that's a good question, but to me, it's like how do we stop this specific one that's happening right now?
Uh-huh.
Like, because
Sure.
that's
Sure. So how do we
what's
stop
actually
it? I mean,
right.
obviously
Well,
you don't have to know, but like what a different way
I
of putting the
I
question
think
that's
it
maybe a
is
bit more
no. I think it's
reasonable.
very knowable. Like you stop Israel from killing Palestinians. That's
Okay,
how
and
it
what leads
stops.
to that causally?
Well, probably having a Palestinian state would be a necessary part of that.
And what leads
Um,
to that?
the U.S. has to stop vetoing it in the
And what
UN.
leads to that?
The change in U.S. leadership
And
and
what leads to
change
that?
uh, people putting pressure and voting and grassroots
Ah,
organizing.
that's where you lose me.
Right, look at Zoran Manbani. He's a good
Hmm.
example of how that's actually happening right now. And he's the only candidate, like major candidate, uh, that I've seen in recent times, progressive candidate who's actually vocal about this.
Hmm.
Who isn't on the sort of like both parties, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, both supported the ongoing genocide.
Hmm. Hmm.
They're equally complicit.
So
You
basically,
might
we should
like one or
elect
not.
leaders that are clear. This, in your perspective, what I'm
Yeah,
hearing is
yeah.
that the salient thing is elect leaders who are clear that this is a genocide, who will end U.S. complicitness
And who
and
are
help.
focused on economic populism because our country really we need that right now.
Hmm. How you lost me there? How does what does that have to do with ending this
Well,
genocide?
you could well, it's both and so it's like if you look at this is a good example. So I think
Hmm.
part of I grew up in the as probably you did too in the fading years of the political consensus between the neoconservative and neoliberal parties,
Uh-huh.
who largely agreed on most everything.
Uh-huh.
They were both totally fine with military expansion. They were both fine with free trade agreements that hollowed out rural America and
Hmm.
towns like in North Carolina, textile towns.
Yeah.
To save 5 cents, on a shirt made in Vietnam, we're totally fine letting an entire communities die,
Mm.
and towns be hollowed out. So it's that kind of mentality. It's like what I grew up in, and it's like the arguments were mostly like stylistic. It's like which style of the same ideology do you prefer?
Coke versus Pepsi.
Exactly right. Coke and Pepsi, and Obama. He fit right into this. He was not a departure. He was a
Yes, yeah.
rhetorician.
Right.
He sounded like a departure, but
So true,
wasn't.
bestie.
Yep. So I think when I look at it in those terms, I say, okay, what is so interesting about Donald Trump and the MAGA movement? Well, it is actually presenting an alternative to the previous consensus. And
Hmm.
the way I see American politics right now, and I could be wrong, is like there's a new emerging polarity, the
Mm.
alt left and right, quote unquote.
Ugh. Ugh.
Um, yeah,
Gosh. Ugh.
neo fascism and neo progressivism,
Uh-huh.
and
And are you
there's
saying neo-progressivism is the answer here?
I'm not
Uh-huh.
actually.
Okay.
Although because some neo fascists don't want us to be sending money to Israel.
Uh-huh. Huh.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Huh.
There's been a number that recently
Yeah.
people who are like, why are we sending billions of dollars to Israel every year when we can't even take care of our own people?
Yeah.
And so I agree with that. I agree with that.
Uh-huh.
What I actually think is emerging and has to emerge as an alt middle. It's a new consensus,
Hmm.
and that alt middle will almost certainly not want to continue propping up an American military empire.
Hmm.
Like both alt right and alt left, that's something they agree on.
Hmm.
They don't want to be constantly waging endless wars. They don't want to be always sending all of our money into our military
And is
budget.
that connected to the populism you're talking about?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's a strand of populism that's interested in retracting the American empire and not continuing to create so many problems abroad and who recognizes that doing so hurts us at home,
Uh-huh.
and because these things are
I
interconnected.
see. Okay, thank you for explaining that. Um, can I recount what I heard just now? Um, your a shared goal that we have is we would like this war, genocide, violence, evil to end. We'd like it to end. Uh, and um, the way that that comes about is Israel stops doing what it's doing. And the way
Yep.
that that comes about is Palestine as a state, and the US stops vetoing certain things at the UN. And the way that that happens is there's political pressure on the US to show up in a different way. And you're saying that the way that that happens is we elect politicians who are want that course of action and also care about this populism and the relationship of how we're spending our money at home.
Yeah.
And the way that we do that is get involved in local political movements that support candidates that have that perspective.
I think that's one of the most direct ways
Uh-huh.
that we can as Americans
Uh-huh.
affect
Well, I'll
this.
tell you right now, I mean, I need to do due diligence on learning more about this, but like I will very seriously both take that into consideration for my own voting and then also in how I speak about voting to my friends and people I'm connected to. Like that's not much, but this is more um that's what I really care about. I want to make sure that whatever actions I take, I am that I can kind of see. It matters to me that I can see how there could be a causal chain where this actually results in the things that we want, if that makes sense. I don't know why that matters to me so much, but it does.
Yeah, well, okay. We haven't talked about Bodhisattvahood yet, so maybe I
Yes.
could bring that in.
Yeah. Thank God. Please, someone help
Yeah.
me.
So I don't know
It's
if
a
you've heard.
struggle out here.
I don't know if you've heard this quote from Uchiyama Roshi, a Japanese Zen teacher. He said, "A bodhisattva is an ordinary person who acts like a true adult."
Mm. I'd never
Uh,
heard that before, but I love it. And what does true adult mean to you?
well, I think a true adult is someone who sees a problem and they respond to it.
Uh-huh.
Um, and a true adult recognizes the complexity of the situation and acts anyway
Mm.
with incomplete information, um, with whatever resources and ability that they have, while acknowledging that they're limited.
Mhm.
So that's a start.
Mm.
True adult cares about themselves and others. I could actually inhabit as a true adult. I both take care of my life at home and I care about the impacts that the country and systems I'm embedded in are having in the world that I'm causal in, that I have some causal influence over, even if it's minimal.
You know what I'm reminded of, Vince, is video game levels. And like I feel like um it seems sort of crass to pick levels, but I feel like I don't know, let's say a level 8 Bodhisattva. Like I'm not level 1 anymore. I'm not even level 5 anymore. But like I feel acutely like I'm really only level 8. And I think it's
Well,
going to
there are
take,
10
let's say,
levels, aren't there, in this game? I'm
oh
pretty sure
no, no, no.
the
By that
Bodhisattva
one,
boomies, the
no. Well,
boomies.
I know what you're talking about, but also that's not the measurement system I'm using.
Okay, you're not.
Uh,
It's not a traditional boomy
No, no.
model.
I mean, I'm thinking like I never played it, but like World of Warcraft, I'm pretty sure 80 is like a threshold in World of Warcraft. It's like
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you need like a level 60 or 70 Bodhisattva to have global systemic change at the level that's needed for the thing we're talking about. And I'm like, I don't know if I have a friend that has a mental health crisis, like I'm struggling to barely be able to support them in a meaningful way. Like I'm embarrassed by how incompetent I am at even that, helping one person that's having a mental health crisis. Like I kind of can help a little bit, you know? Um, but like I know someone who's an extended network right now is having their partner's having a major schizophrenic episode. And I'm like, here, I can send you a link that might help you. That's like, that's so pathetic. That is so disgustingly pathetic for actually having an impact in the world. It's humiliating to admit. But like here we are because there's real suffering and you have to do whatever we can to help. And so I would like to like it would be great if I ended this year as a level 9 Bodhisattva. That would be awesome, you know? And Do I want to have global systemic positive change on a historic scale? Absolutely. I hope that every passing year I'm more and more capable of large scale positive impact. And I'm just so acutely aware of how incompetent I am and how limited I'm really doing everything I can to have a positive impact at the scale that I can right now. And
Hmm.
it's pathetic and humiliating in the context of this larger suffering. I'm fine with that. I'm not embarrassed to say that, but
Hmm.
it is humbling, you know, it's like it's not nearly good enough. And I think the more acquainted you are with how much suffering there is in the universe, the more humbled you are by that, by one's own incompetence to, and then you do, that's the Bodhisattva vows, right? Anyway, is just to be like greed, hatred, and end without end, like vow to end it. Like you get up and do something anyway.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I've there's a distinction that's commonly made in like I would call it like in the woke pluralistic cultural scene of like intention versus impact.
Hmm.
And that's an important distinction when you're starting to get into questions of race and racialization, you know, because people will say things with the good intentions that hurt other people because they're ignorant of the impact that
Hmm.
that has for someone else. And here I think it's like I think of that too with what you're saying. It's like, okay, yeah, like I want to become a more impactful bodhisattva. I want to have a more net positive impact in the world. Um, and on the one hand, like, yeah, I could say, like you're saying, I feel humbled and maybe embarrassed by how ineffectual I am. Um, and I also feel humble about the fact that I don't know the impact that I'm having. I don't understand it. And I feel like this is really, you probably have had a similar experience putting media out into the world. It's like with Buddhist Geeks, when we launched that, you know, the hundreds and hundreds of people that I heard from over the years who were like, that had such a powerful impact on my life. And I'm like, uh, you know, like, wow, okay. That was definitely not what I was aiming for. I mean, I was just doing something I thought was cool at the
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
honestly. And so that wasn't even necessarily my intention.
Hmm.
But that was the impact. And so I'm kind of amazed. So, I'm amazed at how effective people can be without even knowing it. You know, it's like
Hmm.
sometimes hard to know. It's hard to measure. And that's where I would say it's like the challenge here with what you're saying is like I want to see if I'm effectual. You have to be able to measure the effectiveness to be able to know, and we can't fully measure. We can get better at measuring, like we can maybe get more sophisticated in seeing and understanding our impact, both negative and positive. But it's really difficult without going into like you really have to have an understanding of the whole to be
Hmm.
able to see your individual
Hmm.
impacts on the whole.
Hmm.
And I don't know, where am I going with this? Just to say like there's some kind of feedback loop here that I think is like what the Bodhisattva is driven by. Like it's like constantly coming back to a wise or compassionate intention,
Hmm.
and then trying your best to live from that place, even if you're, you know, not effectual,
Hmm.
and then doing your best to understand the impacts of your actions
Hmm.
so that you know you can that can inform how you act the next time that you're
Hmm.
trying to be, you know, coming from this place of genuine wisdom and compassion.
Hmm.
And there's some kind of sharpening of like skillful means that happens in this feedback loop.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like the bodhisattva is one who's engaged in in that process rather than like yes, then there are different levels then or depths or degrees of skillfulness,
Hmm.
and probably in different domains too.
Hmm. Yeah, of course, multiple axes.
Right, right. So, you know, so like I hear what you're saying, and I think that's valid. Like it isn't up to any. I don't think it's up to sort of individuals to solve the global challenges. Um,
No, but I'm also like I'm aware that I think I'm well, I was just humble, so now I can be a little arrogant. I think I'm uniquely well suited to create systems that actually do have causal impact on the historic scale over time. It just takes a long time, and it takes very careful thought and a lot of um, care and consideration and love and effort. And so I would like to. build systems that have a net positive historic impact on the scale of humanization. And as far as I can tell, I'm playing my cards that way, where like I would really hope that if we fast forwarded 30 or 40 years, we would be like, hey, the service guild did really good stuff that was net positive on human society and our
Right.
civilization and the planet. And of course there'll be fuck ups along the way where we mess up and I make just dumb mistakes and whatever, but like I would hope that it's net positive and that it has a genuinely historic, obvious impact on the world that was positive. So that's part of why my care. That's why I would want to have this conversation at all. Is like, how can I build systems that actually do have that kind of impact on ending, yeah, including ending violence of all kinds, and this conflict, this genocide, this war, this evil in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great intention. There's like there's a quote in the Bhagavad Gita that's coming to mind. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something about like acting without any thought of results, or
Hmm.
it happens in that famous dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a difference in Tao. I've been influenced a lot by Taoist strategy, and they talk a lot about the difference between means ends and conditions consequences. And we're really trying to create the conditions for good consequences. So, can I guarantee that we would have a particular result? Absolutely
right,
not. But I think we
right.
can create the conditions for historic, benevolent, beneficent impact.
It's interesting you're talking about a guild because
Hmm.
to me it's like I think of the Bodhisattva as a more of like a relational phenomena. It's
Hmm.
like team Bodhisattva rather
Hmm.
than a Bodhisattva.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so it seems like a lot of the challenge here is around coordinating and connecting and aligning, collective alignment.
Hmm.
Um, and these are the things I think are very hard for people who've been trained to individuate and
Hmm.
who are focused on their own agency. John Vervaeke, the philosopher, he points out like when you take and roll, you are rolling yourself into that.
Hmm.
You're losing a certain kind of agency by inhabiting a role, say a role of father, a role of teacher, a role of whatever. You're limiting yourself in that
Hmm.
role.
Hmm.
And yet you have to play roles in cult, in community,
To do anything.
right?
Yep.
um so I guess, yeah, I don't know where to go from here.
Hmm. Um, well, I would summarize our conversation so far as follows. Um, Teapot, such as it is uh, an emergent developmental phenomenon that's highly networked, that has some strengths and some weaknesses that we've talked about. There is a great evil being perpetuated that we both would like to see end, that hurts both our hearts, and we would like to do something about. Uh, you had some valuable thoughts about what that might look like, how to end that, especially
uh,
American
I think
politics
that's the
and
I think that's the highest leverage point. I think
uh-huh.
there's lots of leverage points, and people get more into this. They start seeing the levers that they can,
Hmm.
where their agency has some causal influence. Like it also matters what kind of products you're buying, and are you giving money to companies that are profiting off of an economy of genocide,
Hmm.
or not.
Hmm.
Like I was drinking Coca-Cola while talking to one of my Palestinian cousins who runs a nonprofit in Washington state, and she was pointing out like Coke
Hmm.
is one of these companies.
Hmm.
And I hadn't, because I've been so focused on the political side of things, I haven't really looked deeply at the corporate side. So it's like, but and that's for me. I care a lot, and I'm
Hmm.
still not doing that now. I've given up Topo Chico, which is a huge that to me is like the,
Hmm.
the biggest sacrifice I can
What is Topo
imagine.
Chico?
Topo Chico is a sparkling water brand
I
that
see.
Coca-Cola
Well, thank you
owns.
for your sacrifices. This is how we know you're a true Bodhisattva, Vince. Good job.
Exactly, dude. You have no idea. Go drink a Topo Chico and you'll understand the
Well, I'm
sacrifice.
not supposed to though. So you're
That's right.
you're you're
Sorry.
morally
You
advised.
can have one just to see. just so
I
you can
see.
see how what of a bodhisattva I am.
I see. I'll believe you. I believe you, Vince. I already thought you were Bodhisattva, so I'll stick to polar things.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
Um,
But yeah, anyway, I'm just trying to point out that it's
there are other
yeah,
leverage points.
there are other leverage points that we didn't
Right.
talk about, and I think that's important because it gets more into a practical conversation of what I can actually practically do. I think the other thing that I suggest to my friends is like learn just the basic modern history of the
Mm-hmm.
situation, so that when you open your mouth,
Uh-huh.
you don't regret the words that come out. Because
Very
right
interesting.
now
Yeah.
most of the conversation is ignorant people talking to ignorant people about things they don't know about, and it's
If
deeply
anything,
painful.
that's how do I say this? I am acutely aware of my ignorance, and that's certainly part of
And that's why
what.
people don't say
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
sometimes, and that's fair.
Yeah.
Like that to me, I would prefer people who are ignorant not saying anything
Right.
to saying something, because it's just like they're polluting
Well, and I'm really
the shared
grateful to
space.
have learned more about it from hearing you speak about it in our conversations, both today and previously. It feels important to, one of the skills I really value that I'm trying to get better at, that I also feel incompetent about, is like just having a global sense of what's happening on the planet, and like in really lots of dimensions, not just politically, not just economically, not just socially, not just culturally, not just technologically, but like all of that. And
Right.
like kind of knowing the gestalt of the larger planet. And um, I don't know, it's important to me to at least know what's happening. So I'm grateful to have a slightly better model of what's happening. And um, I guess what I want to say, yeah, what I feel like summarizing my own perspective here is like, how do I say this? I aspire to do everything in my power to have positive causal impacts on, yeah, global problems where possible. And I'm still learning how to do that and what the actual leverage points are. But like the phrase that's coming up in my head, which I don't fully endorse it, but like I know it feels a little bit sticky, is like, you better believe I'm going to do something if and when I know I can, and like I'm clear about what to do. And like, of course I would want this to end. And of course I would, I mean, yeah, my heart fucking breaks, dude. Like looking at this, looking at other things, it's and if I can do something when I'm clear of like what I can do that makes sense with a bunch of variables that we haven't talked about, but like I of course I will do something and want something, and I think that yeah, I'll speak for myself there, but I think it's really
Yeah,
good to be
yeah,
in connection too, and to just compare notes as bodhisattvas, like
yeah.
what do you even do? There's all this suffering. What do you what do? So I'm grateful to have companionship in that and to speak about these issues in particular.
Yeah, yeah, and this has always been a tension in the communities of people who value contemplative wisdom,
Hmm.
contemplation and action.
Hmm.
How do you, yeah, how to hold these two things together?
And I'm literally doing everything I know how to do, and I will fully admit it's not nearly good enough, but I hope to get better as the years progress and to have
Yeah, well, and
more
and and
positive impacts.
and for me, this conversation again is not so much about you, Tasshin, as it is
Sure.
about
Teapot in general,
Teapot. Yeah,
and also the
and
subset of like Western Buddhists within Teapot and what they
yeah,
can do.
Buddhist modernists, and
Yeah.
of which I used to be one. And when I was a Buddhist modernist, I wasn't a Palestinian.
Mm. Hmm.
Uh, I at least I hadn't owned that part of my identity yet.
Hmm.
Um, because I think to live in the modern world, you have to disown many aspects of yourself
Hmm.
if you want to be able to function well.
Hmm.
Like for instance, on LinkedIn, you don't want to be talking about genocide,
Hmm.
uh,
I should start. You know what,
which I do.
Vince? You know what? I should really
It hurts
start
your
speaking out
prospects.
about genocide on LinkedIn. I've made like shit posts on LinkedIn before, and that was really fun. And I would like to stir the pot a little bit more. So I'll work on that. Thanks for that moral feedback. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah,
What a
yeah,
better
yeah,
use of my, yeah, because I mean I'm privileged enough to not have to worry about getting fired or not having to
yeah.
please anybody in particular. I can piss people off, and that's fine. So,
I saw
um,
you're practicing pissing people off a little more, or you're inhabiting that part of
oh,
you.
working on there's lots of psychological change going on, which
Yeah,
actually I do want
that's
to
cool.
just put a bookmark here. I will probably have to have a whole other conversation about this at some point, but we talked earlier about the whole like niceness versus kindness recurring thing that's in our friendship. And I think there's a whole separate thing that we keep bumping up against that I have not fully understood from you that I should probably just go read some books about, and I haven't yet, but about like perspective taking and I don't even know, but you've perpetually flagged that you're like, oh, you're doing the thing again where you assume that all perspectives are equal and you should just listen to the other person's perspective. And I would still like to learn that from you in time and kind of see that better.
Sure, we
Yeah.
can talk about it. I guess I just mentioned, you know, I mentioned John Vervaeke earlier. I
Mm-hmm.
think for post rats, he's probably a good philosopher to
Mm-hmm.
tune into. I think he um he, for instance, points to four different ways of knowing.
Mm.
Um, there's propositional knowing,
Mm.
knowing basically facts and knowledge, is like chat gpt kind of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Procedural knowing, where you actually know something through doing it, like praxis. Perspectival knowing, which is a
Mm-hmm.
kind of knowing in terms of perspective taking. And then participatory knowing,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like a knowing through participating in something.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking here, like my, like a Harry Mack, the legendary freestyler, is
Mm.
a, if you watch someone do freestyle rap, it's like a very participatory
How is
kind of
that
way.
different than the procedural one?
So like Harry Mack will practice freestyling, of course, but then when he goes in, he's actually freestyling for people.
Mm.
Uh, you know,
Oh, I see.
uh,
There's like interaction with other people in a larger group or
yeah,
something
and
like
there's ways
that.
of embodying, like in the Zen tradition, it's like similar. Like there's ways of like inhabiting what you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that
Mm-hmm.
where you're getting inside of the participation of the moment.
I
Um,
see. I
yeah, and
see.
I don't fully understand all these distinctions myself. So I'd point people to John
I
Vervaeke,
see.
because I think there's some distinctions here that are really, yeah, it's like really helpful, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
to expand the sort of the view philosophically what's happening. And perspective taking is one of those things where, yeah, where it's so much of this is about perspective taking. From my point of view, it's like I'm taking the perspective of someone who shares an identity with these people, so it's like and a history, and so I can kind of take that perspective, but I can't actually take the perspective of someone in Gaza right now.
Mm.
Like I'm unable to do that. And
Mm.
um but it seems like a worthwhile thing to try.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
Can I
Mm-hmm.
take a perspective of Benjamin Netanyahu? you know
That also seems worthwhile.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, well,
Mm.
dude, I appreciate. I know
Yeah.
we've been going for a while here.
Yeah. Great conversation, Vince. And
Yeah, thanks for your time.
yeah.